Bonjour à tous. Vous êtes en train petit à petit de vous joindre à nous dans ce webinaire donc qui va aujourd'hui parler de ce qu'on appelle les liberal arts colleges. Donc on va expliquer ce que c'est que un liberal arts colleges. Nous avons plusieurs intervenants aujourd'hui qui vont se présenter les uns après les autres. Donc, je vais commencer. Moi, je suis la Céline Nouziel de la commission franco-américaine. Je suis conseillère auprès du réseau Education USA. Donc, merci d'être là aujourd'hui. Vous avez donc plusieurs intervenants qui vont vous parler, à la fois des étudiants ou des anciens étudiants de liberal arts colleges, ou alors des représentants de deux universités américaines qui se présenteront tout à l'heure. Alors, moi, je vais expliquer un petit peu ce que c'est que la commission franco-américaine très rapidement et le réseau Education USA. Je pense qu'il y en a certains d'entre vous qui sont peut-être connectés depuis un autre pays que la France. Sachez que le réseau Education USA est un réseau international qui englobe plus de 400 centres d'information un petit peu partout dans le monde. Et il suffit d'aller sur le site. Je ne sais pas si Pierre, vous pouvez indiquer sur le chat le site du réseau Education USA pour pouvoir retrouver le centre d'information qui va pouvoir répondre à toutes vos questions. Alors ça, c'est le site de la commission franco-américaine. Donc c'est le site pour les Français en fait. Si vous voulez avoir des informations générales en français sur les universités américaines, comment postuler, quelles sont les bourses, etc. Mais si vous voulez en fait des informations peut-être en anglais, vous allez avoir également le site educationusa.state.gov où vous pouvez retrouver aussi la liste de tous les centres qui sont les plus proches de chez vous, en fait. Voilà. Donc, je vais demander à chaque intervenant de se présenter assez rapidement. Karen, would you like to introduce yourself just briefly?
Bonjour, I'm Karen Bartlett from Middlebury College, a small liberal arts college in Middlebury, Vermont.
Jose, sorry. Your microphone.
Bonjour. Good morning here in the United States. My name is Jose Sainz, and I'm the director of the Center for National Education at the University of Mary Washington in Fredericksburg, Virginia, just 1 hour south of the nation's capital.
Luke, can you introduce yourself?
Bonjour. I am a senior at Amherst College, which is in Massachusetts. So I'll be graduating in like a month.
And next year you're going to be
I'll be a Fulbright in the suburbs of Paris, which is very exciting.
Pierre?
Bonjour tout le monde. Alors moi, je m'appelle Pierre, je suis étudiant en double master en communication et anglais en France, à la Sorbonne. Et je suis ici parce que pendant mon master, j'ai eu l'occasion de partir une année aux États-Unis dans un liberal arts college qui s'appelle Vassar College, qui est dans l'État de New York.
Donc, merci à tous. Donc, vous aurez compris, cette séance aura lieu à la fois en français et en anglais. On va passer entre les deux langues selon les intervenants. Donc, en fait, je vais commencer par Pierre. Et donc, vous allez commencer un petit peu à nous expliquer votre parcours. Comment vous avez été amené à partir à Vassar?
Alors en fait, mon université française, donc Sorbonne Université, a des partenariats avec des universités aux États-Unis. Et donc chaque année, des étudiants français partent dans les établissements aux US et vice-versa. Donc moi, il s'avère que mon université avait un partenariat avec Vassar. Donc j'ai fait une candidature par mon université qui a ensuite été transmise à Vassar. Et c'est comme ça que j'ai été pris.
Et qu'est-ce que vous avez étudié? Qu'est-ce que vous avez fait exactement à Vassar?
Alors, à Vassar, moi, j'ai surtout étudié, je suis angliciste de formation, donc je fais de la recherche en études anglophones, c'est le nom de mon master. Et donc, j'ai surtout pris des cours dans le département d'études anglophones, en fait, à Vassar, même si j'avais la possibilité de m'inscrire dans d'autres départements. C'était vraiment une appétence de mon côté, mais il y avait énormément de départements, donc moi, plus littérature anglophone.
Mhm. Et comment vous avez aimé votre expérience à Vassar? Est-ce que je suppose que c'était très bien?
C'était très bien. Je suis là aujourd'hui pour en parler. Ça me fait très plaisir. J'ai beaucoup aimé mon expérience à Vassar, d'autant plus qu'en fait, c'est un système avec lequel j'étais pas du tout familier. On reviendra en détail sûrement sur ce qui fait la spécificité des liberal arts colleges. Mais pour un Français qui est habitué à un système universitaire bah, où on est à 200 dans des amphithéâtres, où il y a une vraie verticalité entre professeurs et étudiants. Arriver à Vassar, ça a été très agréable parce que les professeurs sont très proches des étudiants. Les cours sont totalement différents, ils sont beaucoup plus axés sur la conversation. Et c'était un campus qui était beaucoup plus petit aussi. Je suis passé d'une université avec 50 000 étudiants à 2500 étudiants. Donc ça aussi, c'est une grosse différence, notamment dans la manière dont l'enseignement fonctionne et dont la vie de campus s'organise. Je peux en revenir en détail aussi tout à l'heure dessus, mais ouais, ça a été une très bonne expérience, surtout parce que ça m'a fait sortir d'un terrain que je connaissais.
D'accord, ok. Et à votre avis, quels ont été les bénéfices les plus importants pour vous à votre retour en France? Quelle est la valeur ajoutée en fait d'une expérience comme celle que vous avez eue?
Déjà, la valeur ajoutée à laquelle on pense forcément, c'est évidemment c'est une expérience à l'international. Et bon, niveau d'acquisition de compétences en anglais, c'est sûr que c'est toujours un plus sur un CV. Donc il y a déjà ça, qui n'est pas forcément typique de l'université dans laquelle j'étais, hein, qui se retrouve dans toutes les universités aux États-Unis. Hein. Plus spécifiquement pour l'université de Vassar, c'est que ça vient justement du fait que c'est un liberal arts. C'est qu'en fait, j'ai eu la possibilité de choisir des cours qui vraiment me correspondaient le mieux et qui m'ont permis vraiment d'approfondir des thèmes qui m'intéressaient, dans des domaines et dans des cours qui m'intéressaient. Donc ça, c'est pour l'aspect académique. Et sur un aspect plus personnel aussi, c'est des universités qui cherchent vraiment à faire vivre le corps étudiant et qui donnent beaucoup et qui cherchent vraiment à investir les étudiants là-dedans. C'est-à-dire que ça ne se passe pas simplement au niveau de l'administration, c'est qu'ils invitent vraiment les étudiants à venir participer dans les activités et aussi à les organiser. Et j'ai eu la chance, en fait, à Vassar, donc de prendre des cours, mais aussi d'enseigner le français et de participer. J'étais l'organisateur du club français. Donc, j'organisais des séances de cinéma, j'organisais des salons où on discutait avec les étudiants pour leur faire parler français et tout ça. Et l'année d'après, c'est un exemple qui est assez parlant. C'est les personnes qui m'ont succédé dans le programme d'échange ont réussi à débloquer, l'université a accepté de débloquer un fonds pour qu'ils fassent un festival de cinéma en partenariat avec l'ambassade de France aux États-Unis. Donc c'est pour montrer vraiment à quel point l'université cherche à inclure ses étudiants, ce qui est absolument pas envisageable en France à ce point-là. Et donc c'est aussi un plus pour le CV, au sens où on a beaucoup plus d'expérience, je dirais. Donc c'est ces 3 points-là, je résumerai quand même.
Très bien. Comment on pourrait, il y a une question d'un spectateur là, comment on pourrait traduire en français liberal arts colleges? Il n'y a pas vraiment d'équivalent.
C'est assez compliqué, on dirait collège, université d'arts libéraux. En fait, c'est compliqué parce qu'il n'y a pas d'équivalent en français dans le nom, mais dans le format non plus. Enfin, c'est ce que je disais, c'est qu'en fait, on part d'un système univers français qui est c'est une organisation complètement différente. Il ne faut pas, par contre, se tromper. Il y a arts libéraux, mais c'est aussi bien des sciences humaines et sociales, la littérature, etc., que des sciences exactes, ce qu'on appelle des sciences exactes. Hein. C'est pas juste de l'art. Je précise juste.
D'accord. Now we're going to switch to English, and I'm going to ask a certain number of questions to Luke. So, Luke, what are you studying right now at Amherst?
I am studying English literature, so I'm an English major, and I am not majoring in art history, but I have a real passion for it. So I also work at the art museum on campus, and that's kind of how I get to spend time with art.
Mm-hmm. And why did you choose to go to Amherst and to a liberal arts college in general?
Yeah, I think what I really like about liberal arts colleges is there's a lot of one-on-one attention with professors. Classes tend to be very small. And so that sort of tutelage can be really rewarding. And so that, I think, is what sort of characterizes liberal arts colleges in general. But as for why I chose Amherst, Amherst is it's a very good liberal arts college. And so there are a lot of resources. We have a large endowment, and all of that definitely translates into the experience that students walk away with.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you think are the best features about liberal arts colleges? You just explain why did you choose, but once you were studying at Amherst, did you discover things that you really liked and you never thought about that before?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I can say a little bit more about the sort of one-on-one relationships. Like, I think a lot of students who go to liberal arts colleges end up going to grad school, which is, so I think for anybody who's considering doing schooling after the undergraduate level, that something like a liberal arts college would be a great choice, because even whenever you're applying for grad school, like getting reference letters from professors, you have a much closer relationship with those professors. And so things like that really do pay off. And so, yeah, I guess that's what I would say about some other perks about liberal arts colleges.
Mm-hmm. And were you able to get some financial aid?
Yes, so financial aid at Amherst runs in a specific way. They only do, they don't offer merit-based scholarships. They haven't for decades. However, they do meet full demonstrated need. And so I remember whenever I was in high school, that sort of, I didn't understand those terms. I'm a low income student, and so I was sort of nervous about how much US schools cost. But actually, if you are in a low income situation, it is designed to make those schools affordable for you. So like, don't let the lack of merit-based scholarships scare you away from applying to good colleges.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any tips for students who would like to apply to US colleges? Anything you would like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is kind of an English major thing, but I think definitely spend a lot of time with your essays. I think for me, that and letters of recommendation are probably the things that tend to set applications apart. And I think that's where you have your essays are a chance for you to really communicate yourself to the admissions board, and yeah, try and be thoughtful and about how you're presenting yourself and sort of what's important to you. And I would say be sure to communicate why it is that you want to go to these schools. Maybe not explicitly, but sort of have that in the background of your thinking, so that these schools know that you'll be a good fit.
Mm-hmm. Good. Thank you. So now I'm gonna ask Karen to sharing your screen. Can you share your screen? And explain what are the main characteristics of a liberal arts colleges.
Sure. Well, Pierre and Luc did a good job sort of talking about some specific examples of the Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. And I'm going to back up and talk about some of the things that make liberal arts and sciences college, you know, the general features that are unique, that tie all liberal arts colleges together. But first, before I even leave this slide, I want to talk about the fact that the term college in the United States actually refers to the same thing as a university. And so you would be coming to our colleges for a 4-year degree, a bachelor's degree. And we sometimes shorten the name to a liberal arts college, but really it's a liberal arts and sciences college, which includes a lot of science and math opportunities for students. And I think sometimes the myth is that you can't study hard sciences or math or computer science at our institutions, but that's not the case. So liberal arts is really based in the sort of the idea of the Greek ideal of educating the whole citizen. And I think that this is sort of an American ideal that's been put into place in liberal arts and sciences colleges, where we really do want students to study across many different disciplines and become educated as whole citizens. So you'll see either a requirement or an encouragement at these colleges to study many different disciplines before you choose a major. There's very few pre-professional tracks for students at these colleges. Really, the emphasis is on the skills of learning critical reading, writing, communication, research, sometimes global competency or other languages. And the focus at our colleges is really the undergraduates. Most liberal arts colleges have few or no graduate students. So it's those students who are roughly 18 to 22 who are on campus living and learning together in small classes with professors who really enjoy getting to know you and hearing what you have to say in these discussion-based classes. Most liberal arts and sciences colleges have sort of a residential component because we recognize that some of the most valuable conversations you have with your peers might be those late night dorm conversations about philosophy or religion or ethics. And it requires you to be living together to have those, you know, that conversation happen. And so most of our colleges offer housing, many for all 4 years. We encourage you to live on campus, to eat on campus, to recreate on campus, and learn and live together. They're usually small institutions, about 1,000 to 3,000 in general. There will be some that are smaller and some that are slightly larger. As you heard from a couple of our panelists, there's a lot of opportunity to join clubs and organizations. That's part of what makes these places a lot of fun. You can find hobbies, interests, sports, recreation that you like to do with other people and really get to know people around you. There are often sports teams at our schools. We tend to be Division III institutions, but again, that's not a hard and fast rule. That means that really academics are playing the primary role on campus. Sports will come after that. And there is, more possibility for less skilled players to maybe have a spot on those teams. And then the facilities, really, we want to make sure that, you've paid for the whole institution. We want you to come onto campus and make use of the facilities, the resources, the connections, and that's what we are encouraging you to do while you're here on our campuses. Benefits, I would say that, the flexibility, unlike a university track, you don't need to choose what exactly you're going to study before you arrive. We want you to come and explore and just take classes that sound interesting and see how they intersect with your interests. And usually the third and the fourth year, you're honing in on a major and working on completing a sort of an area of study, which is called your major. When you get to make these personal connections, we've already heard, those professors know you really well and they're able to write wonderful letters of recommendation if you choose to go on to a graduate program or on to work. It's really nice to have those connections. And then networking is also fantastic. Our schools have alumni associations all over the world where you can tap into and find careers and internships. And that's where I'm going to turn it over to Jose, who's going to talk a little bit more about the application process.
All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so I know there were a couple of questions about applying to a liberal arts university. So we're gonna spend just a few minutes on what the process is and what are some of the requirements. So go to the next slide. All right. I think it was Luke who actually made a good point about finding your fit. And I would encourage everybody that is looking at coming to the United States for an undergraduate degree to do your research and to plan for a long runway. And what I mean by that is it's hard to make a choice, a good choice, a good fit in a short period of time. Typically, I would always encourage our international students that are looking at coming to the United States to spend about a year looking at choices, looking at schools, looking at programs, and decide which school is their best choice. Is it a certain part of the country? Is it a certain academic track that they're interested in? Is there a family liaison that happened to be in the area? So there are a lot of variables that go into deciding what university is your best fit. So please do your research. You can also, as you do the research, you can always reach out to the admissions team at that particular university. As you know, all the information is widely available on our websites. Because they will be really glad to jump on a Zoom call or a WhatsApp call, whatever the method of choice is, and answer your questions before you apply. When it comes time to applying, typically you're going to find two ways to apply to any of these colleges or universities. There's a common application, or each university might also have their own exclusive application. Both systems are very, very simple in terms of what they're asking for. They're asking for your name, your address, your bio information, your school, your high school courses, your activities, what you've been involved in, and there is also a personal essay that you will be able to attach as well. When you apply via the Common App or through the institution exclusive application, you're going to have a choice to be a first-year student or a transfer student, and that is a simple decision. If you have never started university in your country, in France in this particular case, then you will be a first-year student. But if you have, for instance, done a year of university in France, in whatever university of choice, then you will be considered a transfer student. And I make an emphasis on this because sometimes universities will have certain requirements for first year versus transfer in terms of scholarships. And I'll talk a little bit more in a couple of minutes. Also be aware of the application deadlines. Every university has a standard deadline, which is available on their website. And there's also an early decision or rolling decisions. Rolling decisions mean that we could be here in the month of May or in June, and you could still be applying to some of these universities. So again, be aware of the deadlines, and goes back to my earlier comment about research your choices and understand what the runway is for applying. In terms of some of the documents that you are expected to submit, obviously the TOEFL and any other English language scores. And then there will be some standardized tests, SAT, the subject test, whatever the case is. However, a lot of universities in the United States are moving away from requiring standardized tests. So some of these, the SAT, ACTs, might be optional. And every university will tell you in their materials if you do or if you must submit any of these scores. You will be expected to submit any official transcripts that have been verified and translated into English. And if you happen to be a transfer student, say that you were at Nanterre University for 2 semesters or 1 academic year, you will also need to submit transcripts from that particular university. It would ask you for some recommendation letters, as well as bear in mind that, to be a competitive applicant to some of these universities, you'll typically have to have a B average or higher in what we call GPA, or your grade point average. In terms of financial aid and institutional aid, there are 2 things that, when we talk about financial aid, financial is a very American term, and it is typically reserved for U.S. citizens. Now, international students do have access to some institutional aid, which typically is based on demonstrated need, merit, or a particular skill. I also made a comment earlier about whether you're a first-year student or a transfer student. Some universities might have different scholarship packages, endowment packages, which endowments are monies that have been, and this is very American, it's not necessarily a European thing, where alums typically have made donations to their universities, to their alma mater. So those endowments create scholarships for students to be able to afford the cost of attending university in the States. So in terms of international student scholarships, you might be able to, get some that are, provided by the university, but then department-specific scholarships are also available. So for instance, if you have a particular skill in music, in arts, in athletics, there might be some additional scholarships that are available. And I encourage you to always connect with the admissions team at the university that you're applying to and inquire about, what kind of international student scholarships are available. And also, if there are specific department scholarships that you as an international student will also be able to apply. And really quick, before we jump into questions and answers, once you're admitted to any of these schools, the university officials will be sending you what is called the I-20 if you come to do a full degree. Some of you might think that, maybe you want to come to the US just for 1 year exchange, and that's a different visa. But, you will be working with the immigration officers at these universities to go to the next step, which is to apply for your visa. If you do come as an F1 student, keep in mind that there are some benefits that are available to you as a F1 visa holder, and that is it's called campus jobs, on and off campus jobs, through curricular practical training or through OPT, which is your 12th month of employment after you graduate from a university. And then finally, once you arrive, once you are, part of the university of your choice, feel free to reach out to anybody on campus. You start making connections with your academic advisors, your faculty, your national office. You will make these connections, which will lead you to be able to request reference letters, to request any kind of support that you might need. And this is a little bit different than, going to university in Europe, where, you might just go to class and then at the end of the day, you just leave, right? And go back to your apartment, you go back to your home. But, as we were just talking about, this is a live together, learn together kind of environment. And the faculty and the staff at these universities are really there to work with you and help you thrive. So I really encourage you to network. That's one of the first words that I learned when I came to the United States, and the networking, right? To make those connections, to reach out to people and make friends and make these kinds of linkages. So that's all I have. That's my contact information. And Celine, whenever we want to move to Q&A, we'll be glad to engage in conversation.
Actually, there are already some questions at the same time on the chat and on the Q&A section. And I just wrote something while you were talking about the SATs. Just recently, the College Board decided to cancel SAT subject test administration after June 2021. I guess it's the same in the US, right? But in France and outside the US, the last SAT subject test will take place in June, and after there will only be the SAT general test. So I don't know, maybe some of the viewers of this webinar will not know the difference between SAT general and SAT subject. The SAT general is only for math and verbal section, and it's really not about a specific field of study. And the subject tests are about, I think it's 22 different subject tests. So it can be math, but at a higher level, history, at the same time, world history, a lot of foreign languages. And some university, how can I say that in English? The more selective the university is, and the more they will require tests. But as Jose just said, more and more, even very competitive colleges are reconsidering their testing requirements, especially for international students, because the SAT is not based, maybe it's not based on a specific curriculum, but still it is a test that is specifically created for American high school students, and it does not take into consideration skills that foreign students will learn in their local context. So that's why it's very important to have a very good level in English, and because then the only way for admissions officer to evaluate your English proficiency will be the TOEFL. And there's a question from, I know a parent who is, her daughter has already registered for the SAT subject test in June. Of course, you will look at her score if she's applying to your school, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And even if the SAT is optional, do you think it's better to take it? Or what would you recommend?
Tough question.
Go ahead, Karen. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a hard one because, well, you know, the background is, you know, during COVID, we know that it's difficult and maybe even dangerous to get into a room with other people to take the test. And so, you know, the background is that we don't want to put you in harm's way. If you have a safe place to take the test, then, you know, it's kind of great this year. It's low stakes. If you take the test and you like your score, then you can submit it. If you don't like it, you don't have to submit it. Almost every institution, or I mean, many institutions this year are sort of going test optional for those reasons. So I would say look at the average SAT scores that the colleges are publishing on their website. And that'll give you an idea of whether or not your score is, you know, competitive or impressive in that realm.
Okay. And I often have this question. There is an international program in France that is called the OIB, Option Internationale du Baccalauréat, which is actually not the IB. It's not the same program at all. But they take a lot of classes in English or in a foreign language, but in that case, it's going to be English. But most of their curriculum are in French. Would you require the TOEFL or would you waive?
It really depends on the university, because and that would be, up to the university to determine what their policy is. So if you come from a non-English speaking country, you might be required to show TOEFL scores, unless your instruction has all been done in English. And there are ways to prove that, right? Through transcripts, the high school counselors writing letters, or how familiar the admissions team might be with that particular education system. So it really depends on the university of your choice and what they require. And again, do your research, because all these requirements are listed on their admissions or international admissions at whatever university you are looking at.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Yeah,
can I
go
add
ahead.
a little bit about the TOEFL? I think that students feel like they have to get a super score in the TOEFL. Really, it's more about us having confidence that you can do well in an English-speaking curriculum. It's not about getting the very top score that you can get on the TOEFL. And I just want to also say that most colleges are accepting a number of different tests for English proficiency at this point, including the IELTS and the Duolingo English test. More colleges are accepting. That's one that you can take on your home computer in less than an hour, and it's less expensive. So we're trying to, give you options of ways to prove that you can do well in our English speaking curriculum.
Because at the end, we want to make sure that you are a successful student at our universities. It is heartbreaking, when students are not able to perform for a variety of reasons. But let's not let English be the one and only reason.
So a confirmation. So you are saying that if you're an American citizen but you live in France, you still have to take the TOEFL, right?
If I were the director of admissions of international admissions, I would say no. But again, every variable is better to be consulted with every university that the applicant is looking at. But to me, that case would be, no, you do not need a TOEFL. But because you are a native English speaker, doesn't mean that you can write and do academic work in an American college curriculum.
I think more often we're thinking about your background in English and less of your citizenship. And right. So, if you are a native speaker of English and you've spent a significant part of your high school studying in English, then it might be waived. But if you just happen to have US citizenship and you've lived in a French-speaking school your whole life, then we'd probably want a test.
Karen, did you see a lot of transcripts from French students, and how do you deal with the grades?
So there are hundreds of grading strategies around the world, and the French is just one more of many. And so that's why international counselors like myself and Jose are experts in all the different grading systems that we might see. We would take over sort of reading the international applications that come to our school, because I understand that the French baccalaureate is extremely, your teachers are very tough graders. And, we understand what a 12, what a 13 is, what a 15, what a 19 is. We're going to put that into context because we've seen it before. We understand what you're up against.
Okay, another question. What benefit is there to taking the general SAT with essay or just with no essay?
I think that's going by the wayside as well. I only think of a couple of colleges that require the essay part. So I probably wouldn't advise that you need to do it.
And well, maybe I will just group both questions, but what would be interesting, what would stand out in an application from a foreign student? For example, In France, we have a dual diploma program where students will have at the same time the French bac and an American high school diploma. Would it be a good, a positive point in the application? Or somebody doing another international program?
I think that, it's a very good question. And a lot of universities or liberal arts colleges and universities, they tend to look at an applicant from a holistic approach. So, it's like looking at a menu, right? What options do you bring to the table? So you've done the dual degree, you've done your, OIB, you've done, a third language, you've lived in a different culture, you've done, run a volunteer campaign. So whatever options you have, don't ever hesitate not to mention them. Think about your application and everything that you bring into the table as your only shot to show an admissions team who you really are. So the more information you provide an admissions team, the better picture they're going to have about who the applicant is. And if the admissions team thinks that this applicant is worth of getting a scholarship or a higher scholarship, or there are different the different decisions that are being made when admissions team look at a file. So if whatever you do have in your academic transcript or in who you are as a French applicant, include it. Just let us know the things that you've done in the academic accomplishments that you have.
Mm-hmm. Good.
That's a great point, Jose. And I think that, we also know that French students sometimes have school that lasts much longer in the day than American students. And so we might not expect to see as many sort of clubs and extracurriculars as your American counterparts might have, but also know that even things like taking care of a grandparent or an expectation that you're going to cook dinner 5 days a week is something that you can mention on your application. Those are things that could sort of just be something extra that we get to know about you as a person.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So there's a question about age limit. Do you have to be 18 to get into a college? No.
No.
Yeah, most American students are 17 when they start the first year, right? Okay, so if you're an international student, there's no problem. It's the same thing. So there's a question about a rumor. So rumor has it that Americans who live overseas compete with everyone who lives overseas. Thus, they are at a disadvantage. What do you think about that?
I think that's a rumor, and rumors stay in somewhere out there in the cloud, right? I really will go back to what I said about every university has an admissions team that looks at the applicant overall file, and it gives this holistic approach again, and I think that really describes at its best the way that I would say in my experience admissions teams look at an applicant. We don't look at where the student is a citizen of. If you're an American and you live overseas, well, you are applying as an American. You don't necessarily need a visa. So those are little factors that we internally look at, but nobody's really at disadvantage against anybody else. You are your own self, you apply as who you are, and then everything that you bring onto the application, that's what we look at.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I have questions from Franco-American families, and they ask me, do I have to apply? My kid is American. Does he or she have to apply as an international student or as an American student?
Go ahead. Karen.
At Middlebury, our application process is exactly the same. Our tuition is exactly the same. And so it really makes very little difference whether you have a US citizenship or not. I would say though that, you know, at Middlebury, we're need blind for US citizens. So that is actually quite helpful if we are limited in our international financial aid. If you have US citizenship, then we have a bit more to work with in terms of funding you. So I would still read the application because I am familiar with the French schools and the French system, but we would have the ability to consider that student as a US citizen in our pool.
And, you know, just to add to that, in other schools, a U.S. citizen will qualify as a domestic student, which means that the financial aid package that is federally funded will be applicable to that particular student and not necessarily to international students. However, the tuition scheme might be also different in some universities for what we call in-state students or out-of-state students. So for instance, an American student that is overseas but happens to be, you know, from Virginia might be able to qualify for in-state tuition in the state of Virginia versus out-of-state. And there's a difference in the way, you know, tuition is divided between in-state students and out-of-state students and international students. So, you know, different pockets of the students pay different tuition depending on how they're classified. So again, as Karen mentioned, it's a good point to always check with the university of your choice and see, you know, how your file is going to be looked at and what you need to provide when you say, well, I'm an American citizen, but I just happen to live abroad. Give your admissions team as much information and proof of what you're trying to get.
Okay, but of course you're not going to hide that you're American, right?
No. Of course not. Of course not.
Okay. So another a question about SAT.
And as a matter of fact, Celine, if you hide that you're an American and you're coming across the border, you know, there might be some weird scenarios there with, and then the international office will say, well, wait a minute, what are you doing in our immigration orientation? You don't have a visa. You don't need to be here.
Okay, so a question about the SAT. If we take the general SAT, are we still required to take the TOEFL?
It's rare for a college to consider the SAT a test of English. So really you should be thinking about, if you need to take one, be looking at the big three, which are TOEFL, IELTS, or DET, the Duolingo test.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, any other question? I think we've answered to other question. Now I'm going to ask a question to everybody just to try to think about one particular specificities of your particular college. So I will ask Karen first. Can you describe a little bit Middlebury and what are maybe the most popular majors or?
So if you asked most people in the US, Middlebury is pretty famous for our language programs. And so even though we're tucked in this beautiful spot in the northern part of the United States, it's a very global campus with most students studying one or two other languages, and most of our students studying for at least a semester in another part of the world. So and that gives Middlebury sort of much more of a sort of global feel than some other US colleges.
Mm-hmm. Jose?
Well, the University of Mary Washington was, it's named after the mother of the first president of the United States, George Washington. So he's, you know, raised in the area. So this is a very historical college. And as such, we do have a strong political science, national affairs, a language, you know, history, the sciences are fairly strong. And we are just about an hour from Washington, D.C. But one thing that is very appealing to international students is that we have a significant number of what we call 4+1 programs. So in other words, where you earn your degree from Mary Washington, and then you would have guaranteed pathways to professional programs like engineering, medical school, pharmacy programs, both in the United States and as well as some of our partners in around the world, where you can earn a one-year graduate program. So that's something that you know, a lot of our internationals who do not take the OPT route after they graduate, they tend to go to university to a graduate program in one of these pathways.
Mhm. Pierre, what would you say about Vassar? English or French, as you wish.
Alors, moi, je vais faire un peu de français comme ça. Vassar, sa spécificité, c'est vraiment, il faut revenir dans son histoire. En fait, avant, c'est une université qui est historiquement féminine et qui est devenue co-ed, donc qui est devenue mixte dans les années 70. Et en fait, ce passage de Women's College et de Liberal Arts, ça a beaucoup transformé la vie de campus et les enseignements. C'est une université qui est très ouverte, aussi bien au niveau des clubs, au niveau des minorités, qu'au niveau des enseignements, où il y a une très grande flexibilité dans le choix des études. C'est aussi une université qui est proche de New York, donc c'est un gros avantage, notamment pour les stages, et puis aussi pour la vie sur place, surtout pour les étudiants internationaux qui forment près de 16 ou 17% quand même du corps étudiant de Vassar. Donc ça se retrouve aussi dans cette notion d'ouverture-là. Et puis donc voilà, la proximité avec New York qui fait que c'est assez désenclavé, que c'est facile de revenir dans son pays d'origine également, ou de trouver des stages lorsqu'on en cherche à côté.
And Luke, what would you say about Amherst?
Yeah, I think I said this in the chat, but one of the reasons why I ended up choosing Amherst was because we have a pretty well-regarded English department. Emily Dickinson, who's a famous American poet, grew up in the area. Her father was a trustee. And Robert Frost, who is another famous poet, he taught at Amherst for many years. And so that was something that was attractive to me. But in terms of like, the campus is just beautiful, like a lot of small liberal arts colleges. I mean, we have a lot of greenery. We have like views of a mountain range in the distance. And yeah, it's very idyllic. So yeah, but I think, like I said, I think that's applicable to a lot of the competitive liberal arts colleges that we're talking about here. So.
Mm-hmm. Good. Il y a une question de Valentin, je vais répondre en français parce que ça concerne Fulbright. Donc moi, je l'ai dit au début, je fais partie donc de la commission Fulbright franco-américaine, qui est un organisme franco-américain financé par les deux gouvernements. Et nous avons effectivement, nous faisons l'administration des bourses Fulbright entre la France et les États-Unis. Et donc nous avons des bourses à la fois pour des personnes de nationalité française qui vont aux États-Unis et des Américains qui viennent en France, comme Luke, par exemple. Donc, pour les Français qui vont avoir une bourse Fulbright, ça ne concerne que les graduate studies, c'est-à-dire le niveau master ou doctorat. Donc, ça ne marche pas pour le post-bac. En revanche, comme on a vu, il y a pas mal de bourses qui sont proposées par les liberal arts colleges. En général, ce sont les établissements qui sont souvent les plus généreux, puisqu'ils donnent à la fois des bourses de mérite, mais aussi quelquefois, comme l'a expliqué Luke tout à l'heure par rapport à Amherst, ça peut être des bourses qui sont basées vraiment sur vos besoins. Donc pour ça, il faudra remplir un dossier qui s'appelle souvent le CSS Profile, et qui va demander vos revenus, les revenus de vos parents, et aussi toutes les charges, etc., qui va calculer un peu vos besoins et vous offrir une bourse qui va normalement combler vos besoins. C'est pas tous les collèges, évidemment, qui ont ce fonctionnement, mais ça se fait vraiment de façon plus répandue venant des community colleges, des liberal arts colleges. Donc voilà, donc Fulbright, c'est uniquement pour le niveau master, doctorat ou pour la recherche. Alors il y a une question que Luc est en train de répondre. Maybe Jose, you can or Karen, you can answer that question. For an American citizen with low income, what kind of financial aid can they expect?
Well, it depends on need. They could most likely, based on, again, on their FAFSA application, which is a domestic application, you can get just about everything covered. Tuition, room and board, textbooks, just about everything. It really depends on that FAFSA application that I was just mentioning. And again, that is something that is listed on every website for under admissions for every university, because there are school codes for a lot of these forms. So that the students, particularly Americans, need to follow through if they are indeed looking into financial aid. Now, and if you do get financial aid, that does not preclude you from also getting scholarships. Some of the departmental scholarships or some other endowment scholarships that the university also has. So when I was talking about the scholarships before, the endowment ones and the departmental ones, those are not only available to international students, they are also available to domestic students or American students. The difference between these two groups is really that whereas federal financial aid is only allocated for U.S. citizens, scholarships in general would be available to both internationals and domestic.
Good. And just to finish about financial aid, je vais le dire en français. Donc vous pouvez faire aussi adopter la même méthode que Pierre, c'est-à-dire partir dans le cadre d'un échange universitaire. Et dans ce cadre-là, effectivement, il n'y a pas de frais de scolarité à payer, n'est-ce pas, Pierre?
Oui, exactement. C'était une question dans le chat. J'ai répondu en privé, mais effectivement, on paye les frais de scolarité de l'université dans laquelle on est inscrite, mais pas de l'université d'accueil. C'est-à-dire que j'ai payé les frais de scolarité de Sorbonne Université, dans mon cas. D'ailleurs, c'est-à-dire aucun, puisque j'étais étudiant boursier, donc j'ai été exonéré. Donc voilà.
Donc là, pour ça, par contre, il faut du coup passer par son université française. Donc vous êtes parti dans le cadre d'un master, mais en fait, il y a aussi la possibilité quelquefois de partir même au niveau licence. En revanche, on peut pas partir tout de suite après le bac. Donc il faut commencer des études supérieures en France, faire 1 an, 2 ans, et se renseigner auprès de son service des relations internationales. Donc dans chaque université française, il y a un service des relations internationales qui pourra vous dire avec quelle université américaine, entre autres, ils ont des accords, des partenariats. Et donc là, tout sera validé dans le système français. Ce sera pas pour préparer un diplôme américain, ce sera vraiment pour valider une partie de vos études en France. Voilà. Alors je vois qu'il n'y a pas d'autres questions apparemment. Anything to add as a tip or? Oh, I know there is a question about COVID. Are you positive for the future?
Yes. Yes, we must be optimistic and positive.
Yeah.
Things are looking up. Most adults in the U.S. have started their vaccination. We will likely have all of our students vaccinated by next year.
Yeah, I can say I know that Amherst has set a policy that for any student who is hoping to be on campus in the fall, they have to be vaccinated. And I know a few other schools are doing that too. So that's also something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Également le cas de Vassar qui, à partir de juin, va obliger la vaccination pour retourner sur le campus.
Alors, pour rassurer les étudiants internationaux, si vous n'arrivez pas à vous faire vacciner en France avant d'arriver sur le campus, il faudrait que vous voyiez avec votre université d'accueil comment faire pour être vacciné sur place à l'arrivée. Mais ça, c'est chaque campus qui va décider ça et organiser ça avec vous. Donc, il faut que vous soyez en lien avec ce qu'on appelle le International Student Advisor, c'est-à-dire vraiment la personne qui s'occupe de tous les étudiants internationaux qui arrivent sur le campus. Voilà. Donc, merci à tous. Thank you very much. It was great. I think, I hope we answered most of your questions. So as Pierre just wrote on the chat, we have recorded this session, so you can find the recording on YouTube in a couple of days. Karen just put her email address. Maybe Jose, you can do the same. And I will actually send a message to everyone who participates with all the contact information of Jose and Karen in particular. Thank you, and have a great day for Karen, Jose, and Luc, and great night for Pierre and myself.
Au revoir.
Bye.